What's up, everybody? The video that you all been waiting for, color change in leopard geckos. And now that it's 2025, I want to deliver that content to you. So first off, my friends, for this video, for me to bring you the most amount of information as efficiently as possible, I'm actually going to be using our YouTube channel, Geeky Gecko Creations, so I can show you different types of leopard geckos at different ages and stages of their color development. So step number one, baby leopard geckos. So what I want to do here is show you some baby leopard geckos. You can see these guys are actually tangerine, tremper, albino. So just take note of what these guys look like and I will wind up showing you more, but let's look at them a little bit closer in hand. So you can see these guys are kind of pinkish in coloration a little bit of orange hue in there. That's the albinism that's really having a drastic effect on the way they look right now. But could you guess what color this pinkish white fleshy looking area would be if it was not an albino? You'll have a couple seconds to guess here. This section right here. Well, now your time is up and the answer will be revealed right here. These are from the same clutches, like the same group of females that we were breeding. So different moms and dads, but same genetics. So these guys are all like cousins if you want to look at it that way. And you could see the difference. Some of these are showing a lot of black and others of them are not. So why is that? And this is the first stage of color development that we're going to talk about in leopard geckos, which is when they are babies. So albino basically means the lack of melanin, or in this case, the lack of black pigment and pattern that we will see. All leopard geckos are born with this kind of two-tone contrast. If they are black knights, they will be born with this yellow/black contrast. If they are tangerines, they will be born with this orange/black contrast. And of course, if they're albinos, they're going to be lacking the black. If they are snow leopard geckos, they will be born with this white/black contrast. Real quick, just a note on this. If you are hatching snows, I recommend labeling them snow as soon as you set up the baby, because once a couple months go by, sometimes a lot of them will gain yellow. Unless they're from our Mr. Freeze fasciolatus bloodline, those ones stay white, which is why they are higher dollar and higher class animals. But I have other videos on my channel talking about that more specifically. But you can see this little one right here is a non-snow, and so it's yellow and black. This one is a snow, so it's black and white. And then these two right here are, this is a super snow eclipse, and this is also a super snow eclipse right here. And so they have that different look to them. But if you notice, all babies have something in common. They have a black coloration here with another color that winds up showing on their body. All right, so for our video purposes today, I'm going to talk about the 3 different color layers that make up a leopard gecko and why leopard geckos appear to change color so much. It's important to understand that from a simplistic observation representation, leopard geckos have 3 different color layers that you need to be aware of. Layer number 1, the spotting. Layer number 2, the pattern. And layer number 3, the base color. So can you guys guess what the black represents? Is it layer 1, the spotting, 2, the pattern, or 3, the base color? If you said 2, the pattern, then you would be absolutely correct. And this will be apparent when we move on to our next section right now. So in our next section, the first thing that happens with the baby leopard gecko is the black pattern starts to turn purple as the gecko ages. So can you see this leopard gecko right here? You can see this area that kind of has that purplish hue to it. I'm not sure how good my computer is going to pick up the color, but if you want to see some pretty good colors, go to our Instagram, and all of these posts are on our Instagram. But I'm pretty sure you should be able to see all that purple coloration that is going on. That purple coloration is layer number 2, the pattern layer. So let's go through a couple others and I'll show you why that's the pattern layer. So purple coloration, the pattern layer. And when we go back to these babies right here, again, the black is going to turn into the purple, which is layer number 2, the pattern of the animal. If you are unfamiliar with what the term jungle means in leopard geckos, it basically means anything that is not a normal banded pattern animal. So if you take a quick look at these few babies right here, you can see this baby right here actually has bands that go across the gecko's back. This is the way that the pattern of geckos were found when they were pulled out of the wild. Since they've been pulled out of the wild and selectively bred in captivity, we've been able to breed for what we call jungle, which would be something like this, or something like this, that does not fall in suit with the banded pattern. We've also been able to breed for striped patterns, which is what this is. But this took a longer time to develop in the hobby compared to the jungle pattern. I believe I'd have to talk to somebody who was around back then, but I would imagine the stripe pattern took longer for us to develop in the hobby compared to the jungle pattern, because the jungle pattern, which is something just like this, often a wonky design pattern, is something that just seems to happen spontaneously in the animals now. And actually, you can't really replicate one jungle pattern to another jungle pattern. They'll always be different, which is really, really cool. So if you take one jungle animal and breed it to another jungle animal, they're going to create a bunch of baby jungles that all look different. And now that I think about this, I might try this in the future, is taking animals that have similar jungle patterns, which I guess is similar to my Sailor Moon project. So if you're unfamiliar with my Sailor Moon project, it's Black Knight leopard geckos that have circles on their back, and I want to breed circle-back leopard geckos to other circle-back leopard geckos to create a consistent line of circle-back leopard geckos. But what we're talking about right now is definitely not in its end stages, and I've never seen any breeder replicate the same jungle look generation after generation. It's always different. Compared to bold stripe, which is this right here, is almost always the same. You can get bold stripes that are very, very similar, almost identical to each other, through line breeding and selectively breeding animals that have this look. Now, in theory, you should be able to do that same thing with jungle animals, breeding jungle to jungle that have the same look, but we just don't find too many jungles that actually have the same look. For example, I've hatched 1,000+ tangerine leopard geckos, and this is the one tangerine leopard gecko that has that exact pattern. I have others that are similar, but nowhere near identical to this. So finding two animals that actually have the same jungle pattern to pair to each other, I think would be challenge number one. Challenge number two would be see if we can replicate it by selectively holding back the animals that keep that pattern and breeding them back to each other. But can you guess these black stripes right here? Can you guess if that is color layer number one, color layer number two, or color layer number three? If you said color layer number two, you are correct, because remember, color layer number two is the pattern. In summary, you will come across three different main patterns that animals will have. Either a stripe, a jungle, like this, or standard banding, like this one right here, or this one right here. Now, once you get into other morphs like blizzards that wipe away all pattern, or super snows that drastically change the pattern, that's something different, but just talking about the main pattern of a leopard gecko will come in those three different forms. So as these forms evolve, once it goes from black to purple, purple will start to gather the next layer of color that we're going to talk about, which is actually the spotting. And can you guess what layer is the spotting? I guess I cheated for you right here. It's layer number one is the spotting. Layer number two is the pattern. Layer number three is the base. So pop quiz real quick. The purple banding on this animal, what layer is that? Is the purple banding the base color of the animal? If you said no, you would be correct, because the base color of this animal is actually the yellow and the orange. This animal actually has two base colors, which doesn't happen as much, and usually the yellow is going to blend into the orange, unifying it as one base color by the time it ages out into adulthood. But here's a much better example. You could see the yellow/orange is actually the base color of the animal. At this animal's core, its base color is this yellowish orange. And I'm actually going to switch this real quick. I don't know why I did this. I apologize. I'm so sorry. I would hate for people to be confused, but let's switch this up. The base layer is going to be layer number one. I don't know why. Base, bottom, beginning, one. Duh, Frank. That should have been the first one. Base layer is going to be number one. Pattern layer is going to be number two. Spotting layer is going to be number three. And one of the reasons that it works best in that way as well is because take a look at this animal right here. The base color of this animal, you could see it's kind of this yellow outline with this main orange base. That is the base color of the animal. So at its core, this animal is a tangerine orange animal. Then the pattern layer of this animal is slapped on top of it. I like to think of it like when you walk outside in the wintertime, you put a jacket on, right? The jacket is now the pattern of your figure. If it's a slim jacket, if it's a bulky jacket, if it's a fuzzy jacket with fur, that is what people are going to see when they look at you. But at your core, your normal clothes underneath your jacket is your base layer. And depending on how thin or thick your jacket is, whether it's a sleeveless jacket, it might show your arms or your hands or part of your chest if you have it unzipped, right? So the clothing underneath is layer number one. Layer number one for a leopard gecko is what I call its base color, which would be this orange color right here. The jacket is going to be the pattern, which again, we discussed, will usually arrive in 3 different forms, either striped pattern, banded pattern, which is the most original wild type normal pattern, and then jungle pattern, which is also very, very common nowadays. And jungle can get very extreme. Like I would actually call this animal an extreme jungle here because it has this like really, really lava-like wonky pattern compared to something like this, which is a little bit less wonky, but is still not the traditional banded leopard gecko. So you have to call it something. It's not striped, it's not banded, so it's jungle. And here's just a quick photo of how the purplish lavender color will also come out on yellow leopard geckos, the same as it does on orange leopard geckos. Pretty much any leopard gecko that has a pattern that is visible, so we're not talking about albinos, we're not talking about blizzards, we're not talking about super snows, anything that has a pattern that's visible, it's going to age out purple. So yellow leopard geckos will start to have yellow and purple, and tangerine orange leopard geckos will start to have tangerine and purple. But then the purple starts to develop spotting. And here's actually a great transition photo of what the animal looked like when it was younger, which was right here, and then transitioning to when it was older right here. So you could see the purple faded. You could actually see a little bit of green right here, and you could see the spots obviously have come in because it already started to gather spots even as a youngster like this. A lot of leopard geckos don't gather spots until later on in life. If they're gathering spots at a young age, that's a really good sign that they're going to have a lot of spots as they age out. So you can see this guy has no spots yet in his purple. This guy, the spots are barely starting to appear. As young and small as this gecko is, the fact that it's showing spots means that it's going to have a lot when it's older. Or I should say, not all the time. It can have a lot because sometimes what happens is the spots, which are layer number 3, which we're coming up to, those get eaten up or covered up by layer number 1 or 2. And so we will take a look at that. But you can see right here, again, the purple and the spots are starting to come in. Now, once the gecko starts to age to around 2 to 3 months, the purple is going to turn pure green. There is no purple left at all whatsoever for the most part. I mean, some animals, especially yellow animals, can hold on to that purple longer, but I've never seen an adult like tangerine leopard gecko with vivid purples. They usually really fade out. I mean, there are some projects and lines that might carry a little bit of that lavenderish color into adulthood, the purple headline, but off the top of my head from what I'm thinking about right now, I can't think of any adult tangerine leopard gecko that actually maintained its purple. I could be wrong. If there is one out there, let me know. But in general, what you are going to see is the purple is going to turn to this greenish coloration. And at the same time, the spots are at this point either going to be coming in more, a lot more, like we're going to see with leopard geckos like this, which is from our tiger project. This is a very specific project that I'm working on where I am specifically making it so that I want to produce more spotting on the leopard gecko. You can see another example of another tiger project here. Sorry, my head is kind of in the way. I'll move myself there for a second. But in general, what starts to happen is the purple always turns green. So you can see the green is coming in on this animal. Again, pop quiz, what is the green? Layer 1, the base, layer 2, the pattern, or layer 3, the spotting? Actually, I should do this. Watch this. This way we could, ooh, I like this. I wish I had discovered this earlier on. Well, I guess I don't like it too much because it's kind of hard to see the color of the animal. But for educational purposes right now, the green is layer number 1, 2, or 3. If you said layer 2, you are correct. And the orange, you can see the orange coloration now no longer has any yellow. So a lot of times the yellow will get eaten up by the orange if it's a pure tangerine. Unless it is a crossover tangerine, some of the yellow and oranges will play next to each other, kind of overlapping each other, which look really cool and sometimes outlining each other. But that's all in the base layer where that takes place. So orange or yellow is base layer. Black is layer number 2, which turns purple. Purple turns green, and you can see a couple other greens that I'm going to show right here. Here's another green. So this is an orange base animal with obviously this green used to be purple and then used to be black when the animal was a baby. Again, right here, you can see the light green. This animal is getting older. As the animals get older, the green typically fades out. And a lot of times in tangerines, the green will get eaten up by the orange, so that sometimes by the time they're an adult, you barely see any green at all. But other times, some of the green lasts longer into adulthood, and that's where you get into your line breeding and selectively holding back those animals to bring out more and more greens and stronger greens in future generations. And this was just one more example I wanted to show where sometimes, especially with extreme jungle animals, which the clown project falls into extreme jungle animals, you will have mostly jacket. Think of like in wintertime, New Jersey, Canada, Maine, South Dakota, wherever you're from. If you are cold outside, you're going to have a gigantic jacket, and the jacket is going to cover up the majority of your body. So you won't have it open, so no one's going to see your skin or your shirt underneath. You might even have mittens on, so no one's going to see your hands. If you're getting the analogy that I'm using, this animal is actually mostly layer number 2, which is super surprising because most of the time animals are layer number 1, right? If you look at the animal I just had on screen right here, this one's kind of 50-50, 50% orange, 50% green on the back of the animal there. But if you look at like other animals, here's a good example of an animal that will most likely lose all, if not most of its green by the time it hits adulthood, is because I could already tell as light as this green is, the orange coloration is most likely going to swallow it up as it gets older. However, sometimes you don't know, and that's why it's always worth holding animals back that you think have the potential, because sometimes they surprise you and they actually wind up getting better with age. I would say this is a good example of the green getting eaten up by the orange. You can see there used to be a lot of green here, right here in this area, and then now orange is kind of taking over. You can see orange is actually completely taken over this area of where the green used to be. So you can see this line right here and this line right here. This was a banded leopard gecko and the green was gigantic, but then now the orange is starting to speckle in and creep in, and this is what happens with some tangerine leopard geckos. Others, it doesn't happen with as much, but some it certainly will. So going back to one like this again, usually you see this like 50-50 blend of 50% base pattern, 50% layer number 2 pattern. But on this animal right here, you can see the base pattern, which is actually tangerine orange on this animal. The base pattern is only on its back, maybe 30%, and the 70% is actually the jacket, layer number 2. So let's look at that one more time. The base pattern on this animal is actually orange. Layer number 2, which is the jacket of the animal, is green. And then layer number 3, which is the spotting that takes place on top of layer 1 and 2 is going to be these black spots here. Now, the reason that layer number 3 comes last, and I should have put that from the start, I apologize, is because spotting is the last color layer to finish its full development. So you can see right here, this animal has no spotting. And then as it gets older, it starts to develop a little bit of spotting. And then as the gecko gets older even more, it develops more spotting. And then by the time it hits adulthood, one of two things is going to happen. Either it will have the most amount of spots that it's going to show in its life, or some of the spots get eaten up. Now, a lot of times with yellow leopard geckos, this is our cheetah project, they have the propensity to have more spots than orange leopard geckos. But we are changing that with our cheetah project, our tiger project, and just our tangerine projects in general. I have certain tangerine projects that I am working to bring more spotting in. Imagine if we had an orange leopard gecko that looked like this. How cool would that be, right? And stayed into adulthood. Because what happens right now with most orange leopard geckos is, number one, this is exceptionally rare to see orange leopard geckos that look as good as this with that amount of spotting. Most orange leopard geckos are going to be what's called super hypo, where they don't have any spotting. So that's what super hypo means, is no spotting on the back of the leopard gecko. And you can see, even on a gecko like this, very minimal spotting. And one of the reasons for that is because a long time ago, when spotting was very common and popular in leopard geckos, breeders started selectively breeding to remove the spotting. And then now we're at a point where we're like, okay, we have too many leopard geckos that are super hypo. We need to go back to the spotting. And so breeders are working on adding that spotting back into tangerine leopard geckos. So you can see a lot of tangerine leopard geckos nowadays don't have nearly as many spottings as yellow leopard geckos. So you can see tangerine, yellow, yellow slash tangerine, yellow, yellow, tangerine, no spotting, blizzard, obviously you're not going to have any spotting, tangerine spotting. This is actually more spotting than you see on most tangerine leopard geckos. So going back to a leopard gecko like this, how much spotting is it going to retain when it gets older? Some of this spotting will definitely stay, but much of this spotting is probably going to be eaten up by the orange color of the animal. However, I do have high hopes that this tiger project line of ours is going to yield the best likelihood and highest results in increasing the spotting of tangerine leopard geckos. Now, one other thing to make note of is 99% of the spotting of an animal, which is, again, the spotting is layer number 3, and it goes on top of the other layers, meaning that if there is a black spot that is going to last into adulthood, it will 100% be on top of layer number 2, which is the jacket, and layer number 1, which are the clothes underneath. So that's why I call it layer number 3, which would be similar to an accessory that you're wearing. So if you're wearing a sling bags are becoming more popular for men nowadays. I wear a sling bag everywhere. That is the layer on top of the jacket. So you wouldn't wear your sling bag underneath your shirt. You wouldn't wear it underneath your jacket. You would wear it on top of your jacket, at least for the demonstration purposes of this video. Similar to a purse that a female grabs. She doesn't put it under her shirt or underneath her jacket. She puts on her jacket, then she grabs her purse. And another simple way to look at this would be if you had pins that you wanted to show off, like leopard gecko pins or accessories that clip onto your clothing. If you were wearing a jacket, the pins would go on top of that jacket. And that is an easy way to understand that 99% of spots are going to, number 1, come inside of layer number 2. So notice that all of these spots on this particular example are on layer number 2, which is the purple layer. None of the spots are on layer number 1, which is the orange/yellow base layer. Now, again, that doesn't always apply, because you could see animals like this where the spotting is much more evenly spread across the body of the animal, but that's a little more rare. I would say most of the time, like I said, 99% of the time, especially with tangerines, the spotting is going to take place in the purple layer. Now, the Tiger Project brings in wild type DNA that has more spotting in it and a few other things. So it's bringing in more spotting naturally, which is why you see a lot of that spotting there. But take this animal, for example, only has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 spots on its back, and all of them are on layer number 2, which is the jacket pattern layer. Right here on the green layer, right here on the green layer, right here on the green layer, right here on the green layer on the tail there. None of it is on the orange part of the gecko's body. Just for one more example, right here, no spotting on the orange part of the gecko's body, only on the green, which is the jacket or the second layer of the animal's body. So that you can keep that in mind as a breeder, just to know and to be able to use for your projects, to keep in mind where the spotting usually takes place on an animal. Now, yellow leopard geckos are much less likely to fit into that mold. So you can see right here, this gecko has a lot of spotting where the yellow is, as well as the purple. And then as you can see with like our cheetah project right here, you can see the spotting is just everywhere. Cheetah project right here, spotting is just everywhere. But when you look at tangerine projects, for the most part, you can see all the spotting is going to be in the green second layer jacket areas, and the base layer, which is this yellowish orange area, you're not really going to get spotting in those areas. So for whatever reason, whatever's happened genetically from the wild types transitioning into the tangerines, you're going to not see as much spottings on base layer number 1. But you will find a lot of them on layer number 2, but will it stick through to adulthood? Many of those spottings don't, unless you specifically line breed, like what I'm doing right here with the Tiger Project, to hold back animals that have more spotting, that lasts more into adulthood and is stronger, heavier, spotted bodied animals, and you keep breeding that to each other to produce those effects long term, and that will certainly happen. Now, I am really gonna put you to the test in conclusion of this video. I want you guys to tell me, what are the 3 layers of color on this animal? So, layer number 1, what is the base color of this animal? Remember, sometimes the base color can be mixed. It can be yellow / orangey, or it can be a single color, either yellow or orange. Or if you have black knights, it could be black, right? It might be a little difficult to see, but the base color on this animal is a yellowy orange. That's the base color. Then can you guys tell if this is a jungle, or if this is a banded, or if this is a striped animal? It's hard to tell, right? Because layer number 2, I don't know if you can see it, it's kind of this light green areas right here. Layer number 2 is getting covered up by layer number 1, which is something that happens. So if you said banded, you would be correct, because you could see the outline of banding right here, and banding right here. There's a little bit of a like U-shaped line right there, but not enough anywhere close enough to where I would call this a jungle. This would just be a standard banded animal. And then layer number 3, you would often look for confirmation of layer number 3 on the body, but because this animal is a super hypo, meaning it has no black spotting on the body, you do find it on the head and tail, but the spotting is layer number 3. Now, pop quiz, can layer number 3 be a different color than black? Can a leopard gecko have different color spotting than black? The answer is yes, but there's only one other option that I can think of right now in my head. And sometimes when I'm producing videos like this, it's off the fly. And so I might not think of something in the moment. So if you think of something that I missed, let me know. But there's either black or brown. And for brown, we're going to go to the sold section of our website. And in case you guys didn't know, we do have a sold section of our website, so you can browse through all the different leopard geckos that we've ever produced and sold and see the different types of geckos that we produce over here. So if there is a type that you are looking for, you could let me know, hey, are you going to be uploading any more like this anytime soon? But I'm gonna actually go back. There's 37 pages here. I'm gonna go back. Let's go to 37, because back then is when I was selling a lot more adults, and I can kind of show you also how the geckos age into adulthood. Now, these photos are not going to be as good because they were from a long time ago, so my photographing skills and techniques have changed since then, but you can see this animal used to have pattern. It used to have layer number 2, and then it completely got eaten up by layer number 1, which is the base layer. Same with this animal right here, but I want to look for a nice Tremper albino with some brown spotting. Here we go. This is an example. Right here, you can see the brown spotting on the tail of the animal. That is because this is a albino. And again, albino removes black pigment, but in this case, it actually makes the variation of color appear to us to be this like champagne brownish color. Now, some of you guys might be saying, Frank, I've seen green spots or red spots on a leopard gecko. That must be pattern layer number 3. I would argue that if you see red or green or purple like spotting on an animal, that is actually the base layer with an increased dosage of saturation. So for example, I've had leopard geckos that have bright red spots, or right, like that red spot to me, and I'm not a scientist, but I do geek out over this stuff, and I'm gonna formulate my opinion based on my observation and my current base of knowledge. To me, that is not layer number 3. That is not the spotting layer, but it's actually layer number 1. It's an increased dosage of saturation in layer number 1, meaning that this cluster of cells here actually increases the color pigmentation of the animal. Oh, sorry, I was showing it. I was highlighting base layer 1 on screen, but you guys can't see that anymore since I'm full screen now. But yes, since base layer number 1 has tens of thousands, maybe even millions of color pigment cells, if there's a cluster of those cells that are actually more saturated in color, it could appear that it's a spot, but it belongs to layer number 1. It does not belong to layer number 3. So again, just when you think of layer number 3, think black spotting or brown spotting if it's an albino. When you think of layer number 2, think of jacket. And when you think of layer number 1, think of the base layer clothing. Let me say that in reverse because that was terrible. This is the problem when you don't rehearse things. Layer number 1 is your clothing. It's the base layer of color that the animal has. Again, this will most likely be yellow or orange, or there could be some white in there if it's like a max snow or super snow, but that starts creeping into the territory of a lack of color pigment, which will be a different video topic that we talk about, which would be pied leopard geckos, super snow leopard geckos. Those types of leopard geckos, they're not producing white coloration. They're not producing coloration at all, meaning that the gecko is now left with just its bare skin color. But we'll dive into that topic a little bit deeper in a future video. But for this video, base layer number 1 is going to be the general color of the animal. A black knight's going to be black, a tangerine is going to be orange, a normal leopard gecko is going to be yellow. Those are the 3 main base colors that you see in the leopard gecko hobby. Layer number 2 is oftentimes where all of the friction and fun happens, which is the spotting and these colors that you don't normally see in layer number 1. And sometimes, a lot of times, they get eaten up by layer number 1. But in some cases, with selective breeding, line breeding, over time, we can actually get those colors to stick long term. And so that would be like putting on a jacket over your clothing. And let's say you have it unzipped so someone could still see your base layer. And it's only, let's say it's like a quarter sleeve jacket. So your arms and sleeves are still exposed. And then layer number 3 would be accessories that go on top of your jacket. Grabbing your backpack, grabbing a purse, grabbing a sling bag, or putting pins on your jacket. All of those would be accessories that go on top of your jacket. So basically you got your shirt, your jacket, then the accessories on top of the jacket, and those make up the 3 layers of color to a leopard gecko. Layer number 3 trumps layer number 1 and 2, meaning that if you have a strong layer number 3, it will always show on top of layers number 1 and 2. And most of the time, layer number 2 is medium-ish to weak, and therefore it gets eaten up by layer number 1 and those color cells over encroaching on layer number 2 and just dominating it, so you really don't see much of that pattern anymore leading into adulthood. But again, through selective breeding and line breeding, you can get layer number 2 to be more bold and more strong. Those are usually the higher dollar, higher end projects that have been worked for longer periods of time, which is why they are more expensive, is because most of the time layer number 2 gets eaten up by layer number 1. But through line breeding, we can make layer 2 almost as strong as layer 1, but layer 1 is always going to be the strongest layer. Think of it as the core of the animal. So what did you guys think about this video? I hope you enjoyed this video. Leave a comment below what you would like to see in the next video, and just stay tuned because I have a lot of videos just like this that are going to talk about the nitty-gritty details of leopard geckos. So I hope you guys are enjoying your 2025 so far. God bless, and I'll see you in the next video. Until then, have a geeky gecko great day. Peace.